Is Flins going to be insane power creep in the power creep department? Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Okay, so, as we all know, Flins is a lovely lunar-charged, electro-charged DPS, and with being a DPS comes the question of, are they going to be power creep, and are they going to be absolutely busted beyond belief compared to the rest of the cast? Well, I have a couple of opinions on this matter. In terms of the wider DPS spectrum, no, I don't think that he's going to be touching Moeka and Skirk. Those two are just so far ahead of the competition right now, but I genuinely don't think a new DPS is going to be able to touch them for a hot minute. I would say that the next time that we end up getting a character that strong is going to be some big insane lore release. And granted, Notcry does have a ton of characters that could qualify as that. However, for the time being, no, I don't think that he's going to be touching those two, not even close. Those two are just ridiculously far ahead of the competition. However, when we take a look at other main DPSs who are on a more human level, the question then becomes more plausible again. Alright, he's definitely not going to be beating the top two. That makes sense, those two are literally insane, but when it comes to the rest of the DPSing cast, we can then crack open that can of worms. At least in terms of electro DPSs, we do have Veressa right now who is ridiculously strong, and currently holds the title of the best electro DPS in the game. Not only that, but she's a top 5 DPS in general, being a very strong character on the whole. So if Flins were to become the new best electro DPS, that would automatically make him one of the top 5 best DPSs, because then he would have to be on Veressa's level of performance. And to be honest, I think that with an Efa, that is actually going to be achievable for him. I think that he will at the very least be on par with Veressa. Now, I don't really know about his free-to-play performance, but I do know that at a baseline he is very strong, though I don't think he's going to be exactly earning any top 5 spots without the Robot Lady, or without a C1 to compensate for not having the Robot Lady. But I honestly do expect Flins on release to at the very least be on par with Veressa, and if not then, and if Veressa does still end up being better than him, then consider that in the long run we're likely going to be able to pull for Columbina to seriously upgrade his teams. And Veressa at the end of the day does still rely on 4-star constellations like Chevrus's and Diansons. And I think that, as any experienced player knows by this point, getting one 5-star is a lot easier than getting multiple 4-stars. So if we go off of the virtue that Flins is the best electro DPS, then yes, that automatically makes him a top 5 character. However, how about in relation to other good DPSs? I honestly do expect him to be better than characters like Mualani, because I just expect Flins to have better consistency in general. Yes, Mualani is indeed a very strong DPS character, but she's not very consistent with her team execution. So she's powerful, but it's something that you can take with a grain of salt, and I would say that the same thing applies to Navia. Then you have somebody like Kinich, who is a ridiculously strong DPS at the minute, and trust me, I have quite the invested Kinich, I really like him, and he has not left my team since day one of liking the character. However, I do actually expect Flins to be better than him. I do think that a Flins with an Enefa is going to be better than a Kinich with an Emily. Flins also just has the added benefit of having naturally better AoE. I will say that with Kinich, if you position the enemies correctly, you can actually hit 2 of them at once with one skill blast. That is a thing that I have done multiple times on him, but for the most part, he's quite a single target locked character. Flins faces no such issues. And naturally, if I think that he's going to be better than Veressa, then he's obviously going to deck Chloriander and basically any other good electro DPS, because all of them are below Veressa, so that only naturally means that he's going to come out on top at the end of the day. As for other good top tier DPSs such as Settle Down! Okay, that guy's just kind of nuts because he is constantly getting good new team options. I think value-wise, he's probably going to remain above Flins. It is very hard to believe that that guy is ever really going to drop off in terms of full value, because you're genuinely able to pair him with, like, anyone, and he's able to do ridiculously well. He is such a good addition to an account, I am hesitant to put Flins above Novelette in terms of value. So, I'm gonna say that even if his damage ends up being higher, I doubt that an account is going to want Flins more, though I will say that baseline Flins is still very powerful. But even so, I expect baseline Novelette to be stronger because he just has a ridiculous amount of options at his disposal, all of which are genuinely good for him. He doesn't really have any cope setups. I mean, I'm sure he does if you really look hard enough, but he has so many good viable setups to the point where you're definitely going to be able to find something for him that performs, whereas Flins' teams are a lot more rigid. And that is actually something that I'm going to point out here. I am mostly just thinking in damage here. However, at least these characters don't really want another 5-star teammate in order to feel like they're at their top potential. I will say, and I will emphasize, I do think Flins is a genuinely strong and amazing DPS, even if you don't have the robot lady. However, the drop-off is still very noticeable, and that's the main thing here. I don't really think he qualifies for a top DPS anymore if you don't have his best in slot premium team. I am assuming that you have the weapon, or a good weapon on him, something like Staff of Homa, and you do have an Effa, because those are the conditions he needs in order to be a reasonable contender for one of the best DPSs in the game. Of course, I did bring up Kenichi earlier, who does really want Emily, and I will say that I think they're in a similar situation where they really do want their premium 5-star teammate, but they will still get by fine without. In fact, I think that Flins is better off without an Effa than Kenichi is without Emily. Neither of them have a situation that is as bad as Skirk though, who really wants a Scofier. Otherwise, she is not going to be reaching that top tier performance that she is absolutely capable of. What's really going to be troubling though is whenever Columbina drops. I think that as it currently stands, he's quite balanced. Definitely on the higher end of a DPS spectrum, but to be honest, that doesn't really surprise me. That's only natural. As we go into a new region, the characters are inherently stronger. It has been this way literally every year of Genshin. It's just natural power progression because units tend to be at around the same power level for most of the year whenever we go to a new region. So I wouldn't be surprised if Flins does end up being as good as some of the best of the cast. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be absolute cream of the crop, simply because Moika is extremely hard to beat. That is a DPSing Archon, and they wanted you to know that she's a DPSing Archon. I honestly can't see Moika falling off anytime soon. And then even though Skirk is worse than her, she is still absolutely on her own plane of existence, provided that you have the Molding Chef. So obviously those two are untouchable. But at least for now, I do think that Flins is still going to be at least a contender for the top 5 best DPSs, and will probably take over Varessa's position as the best Electro DPS. If not now, then definitely when Columbina comes out. And that's the main thing that's really going to rock the boat in general. There is going to be a whole lot of buffs for the Not Crycast whenever the Archon of the region releases, and if they're already this strong, I don't even want to know what's going to happen, because I think that if Columbina is a good enough unit, then even baseline Flins without an Effa might genuinely have the potential to also enter that top 5. That is how strong an Archon's buffs can be. Now, granted, I could be overstating things a bit. We'll have to wait and see if the characters are genuinely that good or not whenever they finally get the Archon added to their teams, and the region is still very, very new, so we're just gonna have to wait and see how things progress. But I would like to point out that Flins' premium team is just incomplete at the moment, and I do think that whenever that team is completed, he will be quite the gnarly investment. And yes, that would make him a more expensive DPS, but consider that both Skirk and Moika do have certain 5 stars they want in order to reach their absolutely bonkers levels of performance. In Moika's case, you really want that Sit Lolly, and in Skirk's case, you really want that Escoffier. It's genuinely nothing new. So perhaps it wouldn't make him the most free-to-play friendly best in slot DPS, but it would definitely still make him a valid contender, especially for considering that everybody else has access to their best teams. Now, do I think that this is some ridiculous power creep? I don't necessarily think so, because like I said, I just believe this to be a part of a natural pattern that Genshin usually follows. It's not like this is some insane power spike that came out of nowhere. Now, did Varessa have a long time in the spotlight? I will say she didn't last as long as other Electro DPSs, but it should be considered that that's not an Electro Charge DPS. That is an Overload DPS that can also be played in plunge teams of Shenyun if you really want to, but primarily an Overload DPS. They have different teams, they have different teammates, they don't eat into each other. Now, if you still want the de facto best Electro DPS, I still very much think that Flins is going to come out on top, but either way. My current opinion on the matter is that I don't necessarily think that he's going to be this insane character that is just so much better than literally everybody else that has ever been conceived in this game, but I do think that he's definitely going to be very strong, and I do think that he's going to be one of the better DPSs that you can get, assuming that you have his full premium gear and team. Now, if you don't have his full premium gear and team, then I think that somebody like Novalet will be better suited to your account, because that's a character that's far more versatile and has far more options that are really effective, as opposed to Flins, who has a more rigid team setup and far more rigid requirements. But you get the idea. He is definitely going to end up being very strong, and I don't even want to know how he is going to maul the meta whenever we eventually get Columbina. Now, whenever we get Columbina, that is when I absolutely expect him to be one of the best, and honestly, I am very curious if by the time that we do get more Not Cry DPSs, and seeing how strong they are, it does beg the question. How strong are these characters going to be in their full premium teams whenever they do get Columbina? And are they going to be able to reach the heights of Moika and Skirk? I'm not sure if Hoyo's going to insist on keeping those two as the strongest DPSs around, for any much longer after we get Columbina. We'll just have to see. At the very least, I'm expecting most of them to at least be on the same level as those two, as I can't see them getting power crept for a hot minute. But I do think that at least for the time being, those two are untouchable, and Flins remains as a pretty solid and balanced addition to the meta. I personally cannot wait to pull for him. He is coming out very soon, only less than a week left. Hopefully this video is able to tell you whether Flins is power creep or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and I am waiting for him to release so badly right now.